dark here now, so.
Oh yeah, is it pretty late there?
6:30, but the sun's just starting to go down over the side of the hill, so.
Awesome. Okay, so we are live, and obviously you and I know each other a little bit from the online world, but I would just love um, if you could give a little bit of a background on what you do, what you're doing, your proposal software service. Just tell us a little bit about what you're all about.
Sure. Well, my name's Nathan, Nathan Powell. I'm originally from South Wales in the UK, but I've been in Spain now for the last 15 years, and I've been working sort of traditionally, should we say, as a freelance designer, web design. Well, actually, starting out in print design, moving over to web, and then from web to software and things like that. But and then the last couple of years, I've sort of started to make a shift from client projects over to products. Written sort of 1.5 books. One's published, one's coming out next month, and I've actually pretty much spent the last 1.5 years building Nusii, which is proposal software for creatives, and that's pretty much where I spend every waking hour at the moment. Nusii, from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. So that's it. That's pretty much where I am now.
Was that a slow transition from the client work to Nusii, or?
Yeah, and I'm still in transition. At first, everyone, I think we have this dream of going from freelance to sort of founder or startup, co-founder, CEO, all these dreams of grandeur. But the harsh sort of reality of is any kind of software startup takes a lot of time to build. Takes a lot of time to get off the ground. Many people have said, it's this, SaaS is the slow ramp of death, and I can attest to that. So I mean, I'm still having to take on consulting work. What I'm trying to do now, what I'm tending to do, is sort of taking on a bit of consulting work, keeping that money as long as I can. Living like a mouse, so I can focus 100% on Nusii. Then as soon as I see the funds are starting to dip down again, then I'll say, hey, maybe I should take on some more consulting work and then jump back into that again. So it's kind of mixing and matching at the moment. But the plan is to be able to live completely by Nusii, from Nusii by the end of the year. So
that's amazing. There's two of you working on this now, right? So it's yourself and a developer full time?
That's right, yeah. It's my co-founder, Michael. He's a full stack developer. So originally, because Nusii actually started in 2013. In fact, I checked the domain the other day because it was up for renewal, and it had been bought in 2012. So this has been going on for a while now. But yeah, it was originally just myself, and then it wasn't going anywhere particularly very quickly, and sort of luck stepped in, and I was actually working at a startup at the time. And Michael was developing there, full stack developer, and he took an interest and said, let's do something together. And I was like, okay, because it's going nowhere and it needs some help. So yeah, it all worked out nicely.
That's awesome. And I'm curious, why proposals? Like, is the proposal process something that you've enjoyed or you felt like you got really good at? Or obviously there's a need for helping people make proposals, but I'm curious how specifically you decided that was your direction.
People say go after your passion and things like that, but I'd be challenged, or I challenge anybody to say they're passionate about proposals. In my case, it was because I hate proposals. It was quite the opposite.
You wanted to make it easier for yourself to...
Yeah, I hated writing proposals, and I would invest a lot of time in writing proposals. Oftentimes, a lot of time that would be sort of, money down the drain, so to speak. Traditionally, I'd create my proposals in InDesign. Then from InDesign, obviously, I'd have my template set up, which I'd invest a lot of time in. And then from InDesign to PDF, then from PDF to email, and then sent via email. This would obviously take a long time, and at the same time, I never knew really what I was writing. I never knew if what I was including in these proposals was actually any good. So I just thought, there's got to be a better way of doing this. I have to be able to write better proposals. I need to be able to, to get better work more consistently. So I started to look around, obviously things like Word and InDesign and sort of other methods that people are using weren't, to my mind, they weren't great. And even when I started checking out other sort of software systems that were available, you got sort of BizSketch, Quote Roller, Proposify, and these other people, I just couldn't find anything that worked for me. They were, to my mind, they were systems that had been built by people who weren't writing proposals. They were written by developers. They were written by sort of companies that had funding, but that weren't involved in the process. So I thought, well, what the hell? Let's see what I can do, and it's kind of evolved from there, really. And thankfully, other people have found it valuable as well.
I'd love to know how much time you think it saves now using this kind of process. Like, how much time were you spending on your proposals before?
Oh man, it would depend on the project, obviously, but I was never the kind of person that would just bang out a proposal in an hour or two. Some people, they just pretty much everything is standard, and they just swap out names and things like that. That's never really worked for me, even when I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Or maybe that's why it took me so long. But I'd always spend at least sort of half a day writing proposals, even when I started. And I think, I've managed to get that down considerably now. I pretty much have my process set up. There are always certain, I think, sections or certain areas of a proposal that sort of can be reused, and I think it's good to do that if you can, sort of in areas where you might be an introduction just to yourself or to sort of essential costs, maybe, sort of next steps. I always try and spell out what the next step of a proposal should be, because, people don't always know, what they need to do to make sure that they have to work with you, and that needs to be spelled out, literally. So things like that I reuse a lot now, and that just gets dropped in. And I probably can get a proposal out now in a couple of hours compared to half a day to a day. But I know customers as well now who are literally getting proposals out in half an hour. So I think it just depends, really. It really depends on sort of how you approach your proposals. And the kind of projects you're going after as well, obviously.
Yeah, and I'd love to know a little bit about your sort of scoping process. So, like, how much time are you spending with someone before you put the proposal together? Obviously, that information collection stage is kind of sets the groundwork for, where you take the proposal. So I'd love to know what that looks like for you.
Yeah, that's changed a lot over the years, actually. I think before, when I was new to freelancing or sort of hungry, almost quite literally, I would just, the email would come through, dear designer, they'd copy and paste it in the name or whatever, they'd seen me on Dribble or something, and you think, oh wow, yeah, here's a contact, and they'd say, okay, so we need, whatever the case may have been, we need a website, or we need, a web app or a mobile app, it needs to do this, that, or the other, how much is that going to cost? And back in the day, you'd think, right, I need this job. I'm not going to be the only person they're writing to, so I just sort of jump in straight away on what they'd sent through an email, which would be, website needs to do this, that, and the other, and I'd send the price, and then I'd get it out by the end of the day, because I was scared that if, they didn't get that straight away, I'd lose out on the job, and I'd continue to be hungry, or I'd continue, to whatever, and there would never be another client again, ever, which is obviously never the case. But I think a lot of us are scared of that, aren't we? That, if I don't get this one now, it's, it's the greatest job or the best job, or I really want this because it's something new and exciting. If I don't get it, that's it. But there is always something else. But anyway, and I started to see that, there's obviously something not quite right here, because I'm just going off of this sort of bare minimum sort of information that they're sending out to maybe tens of other designers, and I'm just another one on the list. They're just going to be looking essentially at my pricing, because they know nothing about me. They know nothing about me, I know nothing about them, and that's it. So I thought, right, something needs to change, and what needed to change was the fact that I needed to start interacting with these people. You know, I needed to actually say, well, hey, you know, this sounds like an interesting project. Why don't we try and get together? We'll talk about it a bit, and I can see what you need, you know, and we can move from there. And it's been a very sort of natural and a very sort of casual process, just that, you know, we'd sort of hook up, we'd say, okay, let's jump onto Skype or something, and we'll talk. And basically, I will just open the doors for them to tell me about their project. If I can pass, you know, the entire half an hour, whatever it takes, you know, without saying a word, that I know it's gone pretty well. The trick is just to get them talk, you know. You need to tell, and it can be very casual, you know. The first meeting can be very, very casual, you know. Just ask them about what they're doing, what it is they're hoping to accomplish, you know. What they've done in the past, you know, what's working, what's not working. It can be very, very casual, and then I think the things you learn even just from that first meeting can then be sort of looked at, thought about a little bit, and then taken to perhaps a second meeting if, you know, if you think that the project is going to be worth your time. Something a lot of people are scared about in that initial meeting is sort of asking about the budget. If you haven't done that already, you know, through like a pre-screening process, I just kind of take a step back. You know, a lot of freelancers do pre-screening, which is obviously a good thing to do. But if by that point you don't, you know, you haven't scared away the people that don't make it into your work list, then obviously now is a good time to ask. And a lot of people are scared about budget, but you know, you don't want to be investing time in and yet another meeting, you know, half a day or whatever it takes you to prepare a proposal, and the mental time away from that as well, if they don't even fit the bill. So that's also a great time to be getting that budget if you don't already have it. But yeah, I think essentially just those first one or two meetings is just asking a series of questions, you know, just letting the client talk. I always record all of my interviews with my clients. Obviously, you want to check on that first with your client, because there are just so many things, especially if like now you've got video, because you can see the telltale signs in the face, you can see what they are really struggling with, you can make note of languages they use, you know, because in a proposal you want to speak to them, you want to repeat back to them what they've said and how they've said it in the language that they've used, you know. If you just start reading back technical terms and sort of idiosyncrasies and, you know, vocabulary that means nothing to them, well, you've probably lost them, you know, straight away. So
that's definitely something that I've noticed with a lot of designers, or that I'm trying to push them away from, is listing features, you know, and talking in features. When they say work with me, it's like, you know, here's the list of features that you get, and the technical, and it's going to be responsive, but it's not really using language that the client is asking for. Right?
Sure.
So.
Sure, and it's not even, I mean, to a certain degree as well, and this is always slightly tricky, but I mean, to a certain degree as well, you know, do you even need to be talking about the fact that it's going to be responsive, non-responsive, that it's going to be built with, you know, whether it's going to be built on Rails, or, you know, whether I use Sketch or Photoshop? I use Sketch. But, you know, at the end of the day, the great majority of clients won't care about that, because all they care about is whether you can help them improve their business in whichever way that might be. You know, that might be more trials, more sign-ups, you know, more sort of customers, whatever that might be, and that's all they care about. So features you can almost push to one side, and I think as well that's something that a lot of newer freelancers tend to fall into, that sort of price list proposal that you mentioned. You know, you list out the sort of the feature or the technicality of something, and then put a price next to it. But of course, once you start listing prices and listing items, then it just becomes that. It becomes, you know, a price list. It becomes a Chinese menu. It becomes something that is a cost and has no value.
It's a commodity service, yeah. I'd love to know how specific you get in your proposals. Like, this is something that I made a change in actually giving less detail and less information, and I often recommend doing a discovery process that could actually have its own potential budget. So, hey, let's actually scope out what the best tools are and all of that. But I can't give, too much of that too early on with just a half-hour or 1-hour conversation. So I'd love to know how detailed you get, and do you actually, get further into that process and then say, hey, now that we have more detail, that proposal cost is actually going to shift a little bit.
So like a roadmap type scenario, yeah, where
Yeah.
the roadmap scenario isn't something I've really done myself. I know a lot of people who do and do it successfully, and I do think that's a good way to work. But I definitely have moved away from sort of being more specific to sort of less in the terms of what I provide. And I don't mean less specific as in, I'm going to provide whatever and it's going to be whatever price. In fact, my pricing sections now are blocks of text. So I might offer, if a budget is say $5,000, for example, for whatever that, I would always offer sort of 2 or 3 options, generally 3, because 3 is the magic number, as everyone knows. I'll keep obviously one option within their price range, because that's what we've spoken about, and then I'll tend to add a couple of options that go above and beyond, obviously with increased value and increased return on investment for them, because there are always things, as you will have learned in your road mapping sessions, in your discovery sessions, that hadn't occurred to the client initially. So I kind of do that, but sort of outside of it. So these are things that I would be thinking about. So if it was perhaps a sort of a website redesign or a website build, there might be things that they haven't taken into account, like the content generation, content marketing, social media, newsletter, who's going to write all that, who's going to get it out, who's going to send it out, who's going to take care of that, and of course you're adding more value, and the return on investment is going to be larger for them. So of course you can increase the price there as well. And those, for me now, they tend to be descriptive paragraphs about, these are the sort of areas that we, this is what we can do with this sort of, the word escapes me now, but with this pricing section, this pricing, so there'll be 3 groups, and this is what we can help you achieve with this, and it will help, and of course the cost will be there, but I'll never talk in sort of I won't ever get down to, we will, run out 2,500 emails for you on a monthly basis, and I'll talk to the end goals. We will help increase your trial signups by doing this, or we will help get more users into the funnel by content marketing or getting it out. So my pricing sections are literally now, they are paragraphs of text explaining the sort of the results that I hope that we can achieve from their goals, and then the associated price tag.
I like that, and then it's obviously more in human terms and less like that list format that you're.
Totally, because I write to them as we've previously communicated, and trying to use language that we've already used. So it just becomes another part of the document. There's not so much of a jump between sort of, here's what we can do and this is how much it's going to cost you. It's more of a continuation, and I think because a lot of clients do tend to just skip to the pricing section, regardless of how much they want to work with you. But if they do skip to the pricing section and they do just see that list of items, then it's a bit of a I don't know. There's just something that doesn't quite sit. It's a bit jolting, I think. But if they do go there and then they see a description, an overview of what that cost is going to get them instead of a Chinese menu, then I think is more powerful. It's easier to see the value.
And it's harder to to have them be like, what, I'm being charged this much for SEO or this much, and like they start associating the tactics with a price, but without the full context of
exactly,
what
and they can start to pick and choose as well then, because if you do have it as a line item, they can say, well, do you know what? We're not really sure we need this now, so let's just take that $500 out, and maybe it doesn't need to be responsive now, so we'll just take that one out, and we'll come back to that later, and you don't give them that option.
There's a great question that just popped up, and it's how do you work with people, startups, who may not be completely unfamiliar with technology? So they say they don't know what what the budget is, what the possibility for what they want is. So yeah, they're not familiar necessarily with what they need, and they don't know what their budget is. So they're saying, "You tell me what the budget is. What should I be looking at?"
It sounds to me like they do know what they want, because that old trick of saying, "No, you tell me how much it would cost." I think if they're saying really that they don't know what they need at this point in time, then the only thing you can do is to sit down and talk to them, and not even really ask them what it is they need. Talk to them about what their problems are at the moment. If they're a startup that are just trying to get off the ground, then they're obviously trying to deal with their own sets of solutions to problems. So how can you help them solve other people's problems? And that could be whether that's the website or the app, or maybe even something far simpler, getting content together, or starting to build a community, or starting to build excitement, depending on whatever you work in. But that thing as well about, well, we don't really have a budget, or not that we don't have a budget, we don't want to tell you, we want you to tell us how expensive or cheap you are. I think that there's a softer way of doing it, and you can sort of say, instead of just outright asking, well, tell me what your budget, because I don't get out of bed for less than X dollars. You can say, well, can you give me a ballpark budget on what you were expecting to pay? Because and I've said this before, because I don't want to come back to you with some crazy proposal that's just going to waste your time. And you can even say, are we talking 5K? Are we talking 5 to 10? Are we talking 10 to 15? And if they, for example, if they just say, well, 5K, is that is that the minimum? Well, then pretty much that you can, if that's your minimum, then you can just say thank you very much for your time and just walk away. But if then they come back and say, well, actually, we were thinking 5 to 10, well, then you've already got that sort of that little step towards knowing what you should be working on and what you can work on together.
Yeah.
I think it's just this getting them to talk first. Don't ask them to prescribe the solutions. Just get them to talk about their problems, and just be gently about the budget. Some customers will have no problem in telling you, especially if they're larger. They might say, well, actually, we've got, this is our budget. But I always just say, I don't want to waste your time with some crazy proposal, so sort of give me an idea and
make sure you're roughly on the same page.
Yeah.
And I've had clients that through email they've indicated maybe a $5,000 budget, and I almost didn't take them on, but after jumping on Skype with them and having a conversation, asking them questions, and kind of just throwing out some insights and ideas, they were like, oh, okay, we get what you do. The budget is now suddenly 10 to 15K. So they've more than doubled their budget just from the initial conversation. So the budget isn't always fixed, right? If you can demonstrate your value in that discovery process, then I think it can open some doors.
I think that's very true as well. I think because, a lot of people, as the person who just asked the question said, when you're working with new startups, they don't always know how people work and how freelancers work, or small companies, small startups work, and they are sort of used to having that sort of desk mentality or whatever. That, a website's only going to cost me $500, and we all know what you get for $500 dollar website. But I think as soon as you sort of come back to them, as you said, you start talking, and you sort of you organize meetings, and you ask them, the pertinent questions, they can start to see that you work differently to these other people. I think it's very easy to set yourself apart from the sort of, in quotes, standard freelancer who does receive that email saying, we need a website, we need it, we can spend $100, you get the proposal out the door by the end of the day. As soon as you step away from that, you're already setting yourself apart, and your value, I think, automatically is raised. And if it's not raised in their eyes, then you don't want to work with that client anyway.
I agree. I did once have a client that said the questionnaire that I sent them, the sort of pre-qualifying questionnaire, actually got them thinking, and they actually realized, like, oh, okay, we're not just hiring a designer. So I think even just in demonstrating that there's a curiosity, that you have further questions to ask, actually does kind of set the bar a little bit.
Totally. I think the bar has been set really low, and it's really easy for us to be able to make that little jump and to set ourselves apart as, you know, someone who does this professionally and takes it seriously. I remember an old client of mine said to me that the only something essentially he compared us to used car salesmen and said they were the only profession that were worse than web designers.
Wow, that's pretty bad.
For flakiness. I hasten to add he wasn't talking about me, but it just gives you an idea of sort of, you know, you only need to make that sort of that little bit of effort, set yourself apart, and it automatically changes the game for you. Like you said, you can go from that $5,000 to that 10 to 15, just by thinking a little bit and just being you, just asking questions.
Absolutely. It's sort of like saying, you know, how much is a car? What kind of car are we talking about? How long is a piece of string, right? So, yeah,
Exactly.
there's so much room, I think, to just ask better questions. And I think I'm kind of curious, scope creep, in terms of putting a proposal together and then actually taking on the project. How often does the scope change from what you initially you know, proposed, and how do you deal with that throughout a project? Do you actually say, here's a revision memo, you know, we're actually making a change to the initial proposal? I'm curious if that.
Do you know what, I haven't had a problem with scope creep for a long time, and it's not that. Oh, I don't know what it's not that. I certainly charge differently now to how I used to charge. In the last 10 years, I've been through every method of charging a client or project that you could imagine. But I generally tend to avoid the scope creep in the fact that, and it all comes back, like everything in my proposal comes back to the preparation, the getting to know the client, the getting to know the problems. And I think the more thorough you can be there, the better idea you do have, and you know what you're providing, and you know how you're going to help them. So, because my deliverables aren't fixed per se. What's fixed are not the results that I'm promising, because promising results can be a very difficult thing. Return on investment, whether it's tangible or intangible, is a difficult thing to work to. Yeah. But what you can do is help improve the situation they're in, and especially in this preparation, in these pre-proposal interviews, you know, the more in depth you can get, and even if you can have sort of access to data, the more you can get a client to trust you, the better it is for everyone. If you can have access to their Google Analytics accounts, you can see how many people are visiting the website. You can see how many people are signing up. You can see, and so if you're saying, okay, well, we're going to try and get, you know, a 20% increase in 3 months, then that's it. You know, so the scope of what I'm promising is kind of set in stone, and if the amount of work that I have to put into that changes, that's on me. So I make sure I charge enough to cover that changing.
To remove resentment.
I didn't used to work like that. I mean, I used to, I charged by the hour, charged by the day, fixed charge by the project, but with a defined scope, which of course had lots of times been added onto, and I would, through gritted teeth, say, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. But I think it changes when your deliverables change. When your deliverables become something other than a PSD file, or, you know, a sketch file, or you know, sort of code, or then I think it's easier. It becomes easier. But of course, you have to make sure that you're charging to cover those potential scope changes. But I mean, but you work slightly differently, though, don't you? Because you work with, don't you work with summaries of, you know, this is what we've done in this amount of time, and I believe that this might indeed change again for the next sort of period of the project. So actually, it's going to cost you. I mean, how do you approach that?
For me, lately, it's been I will map out maybe 3 phases of a project. So I'll say, let's get your MVP up. This is something that I've been telling a lot of clients, because I think people try to do, they bite off more than they can chew in the first website, and they want the online course and they want the e-commerce and everything, but maybe they don't have a website yet. So I'll say, hey, let's get your blog up and running first. Let's do this MVP. So this is what this looks like. Maybe it takes 3 months. These are, and again, it's in paragraph form, so it's not like here's the list of features, but it's let's get your newsletter together, let's get your blog together. Great, we're looking at 3 months, and we're looking at this price range. And I leave a range there because they may want a complex gallery feature, they may want, whatever JavaScript features. So I do keep it kind of loose just to make sure we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've kind of mapped out also, like, what does that next 3 months look like? So great, let's spend the next 3 months after that building your audience, working on your online course, doing this kind of phase, and then phase 3 might look like this. So I'm kind of painting what the next 9 to 12 months of working with me looks like, but focus on phase 1. So that's kind of how I've been working.
So each stage would be a complete project, so to speak. So okay.
And I give a very sort of rough grayed out estimate of, like, here's an estimate of that scope, and again in a paragraph form, like very simple, and with a very loose price range, because we may decide you want 5 online courses in the next phase and not just 1, or like it's just impossible to know. But if I would do so much strategic work in the first phase of the project, that ends up informing what those future phases look like. And like, this is something that I've noticed in my process, over many years. We all kind of notice our tendencies, and mine was always to throw out ideas. So I'm like, oh, have you thought about doing this? What about this? Because I'm always learning about marketing, and I'm learning about, the potential and the possibilities. So I keep throwing ideas out there to my clients, and they're like, great, let's do it. And then I was like, oh crap, I've increased the scope, and I didn't really tell them that was, a higher price point. How did I get myself into this situation? So now I give a bigger range, a bigger price point, and I just say, again, charge enough not to be resentful when they're like, yes, I love that idea, let's do that. I'm like, great, I've already factored that into the scope. So I kind of factor scope creep in because I know that's my style, is
sure.
The ideas.
It's strange how we both move towards that as well, is making sure that you're already accounting for these sort of possible changes, valuing your time enough to know that regardless of what happens, there are always going to be sort of add-ons or unexpected changes.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Someone says, so what if the startup only really has 500, even though they may appreciate more and value what you bring to the table? Do you still take on charity cases? It's an interesting question, because I was going to say part of, I think, being a great designer and asking the right questions right from the get-go in that discovery process is saying, being able to look at someone's budget and say, great, okay, you have $500, let's look at a content strategy. Let's look at, like, maybe it's not a web redesign, maybe it doesn't have to be a full picture, and I think being able to work with someone on their budget is just part of. You can decide, maybe I don't want to take on a project that small, that's fine, but I think knowing how to meet someone at their budget is kind of a skill on its own. Like, people don't always need the full shebang. Sometimes that $500, you could take that in a different direction. It doesn't have to be, especially if you're just starting off yourself. Yeah.
I think it depends completely on you and where you are and what you need as well at the time. Because if $500 for whatever it is they're proposing doesn't appeal to you, but you're in a position where actually the rent needs to be paid by the end of the month, then well, sometimes you're going to bite the bullet and say okay. But it's like you say as well, if they're saying, well, this is our budget, you don't have to. For example, if somebody comes back, if you turn it around the other way and you were to send out a proposal to these people and the proposal was, came in too high, and they would say, well, actually, we've only got $500, which of course you would have found out in your first meeting or your pre-screener or whatever, then you can say, well, actually, instead of just forgetting about it, let's see where we can reduce the scope, like you're saying, because it doesn't have to always be the full website redesign. It doesn't always have to be the front and back end. Doesn't have to be hooking it up with every API under the sun. It can be as simple as getting their launch page up, or getting some basic content done, or some initial branding. Or there are so many sort of ways you can go before saying no, if $500 is within your sort of minimal working price range.
Yeah, and I think it's an opportunity, like you said, to say, okay, you guys say you have $500. Here's what I'm recommending based on what we've talked about. Here's what we can do for you. If you had, 2,000 to 5,000, here's kind of what I could see doing next for you. And again, like kind of paint that picture of what it could look like when their budget increases, when they're ready to take it a step further. I think it's kind of a chance to sort of upsell. You're not really selling it, but it's just there's only so much you can do for a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
You can't take the hit for someone else's business. Like, why is your business taking a hit so that another business can,
Sure, you can paint. Yeah, and I think it's a good opportunity to even if they don't go with you now, it's a good opportunity to sell yourself for the future, because you are painting that picture of this is what tomorrow could look like if and when you have this budget. And if it means that they do go elsewhere, or they go the Odesk route because they need the entire website and application done for $500, well then, those things are always going to happen. But they may well come back to you in the future when they do have that 3 to 5K or 5 to 10K, because you've told them, this is how things can look for you with this kind of budget. And the chances are they'll be disappointed with whoever did the $500 website anyway. So, you'll probably see them again.
Yeah, it's like you have to set realistic expectations. It's not that they can't expect the full scope of a full website redesign, development features for for $500. Like it's not realistic, and you're devaluing yourself and the industry if you take on a project like that. But to work with a $500 budget, but really reduce the scope. And someone else just pointed out here, they said, I have an existing client who I did a website for a couple years ago. They're in need of an upgrade in their marketing. She only has $500. I suggested to her that we do a consultation based on her hourly rate and discuss what her needs are and where to go next. So yeah, it could be, hey, great, that gets you like 5 of my hours or 10 of my hours, and let's really look at who you could hire. Like, do you need to hire a student to help you with this because you're bootstrapping? That's totally fine. Like, I really do think that there's room for everybody in the market, and there are times when a small bootstrapping company just needs to hire a student web designer. They don't need anything crazy fancy. They're not at the point yet where they're they do have the budget for something a little more intense. So I think it's okay to.
It's that beautiful stepping stone, isn't it, between freelancer and consultant? So, like the question just now, they said, well, let's talk, and I can help advise you on how you can best spend that $500. Because with me, it's not going to happen. But I can help you look at sort of other avenues open to you, and through my skill and expertise, we can sort of do that together.
And that almost becomes like a mini road mapping session of sorts, right?
Sure, sure.
Presented my suggestions as me being a partner with her. This way they can, so you end up kind of, let me partner with you. Let's look at this together. Let's make some decisions. Let's, dig deeper and see what we can do for you, and, show them that you have their best interests at hand.
I think that's when you sort of make the switch, isn't it? When you start becoming even more valuable, when you start becoming the consultant as opposed to just the sort of the freelance hands,
the executor.
That are there for hire, and you start in sort of helping them with things that you know about, the knowledge that you have, and the things that they don't know about.
There was a question that came into the Slack group yesterday that I thought was kind of interesting. So one of the girls was saying she has like a branding questionnaire that she gets her clients to fill out, and I'm just going to pull it up here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the thing I find difficult is I'm not good on the phone. So some people get really flustered, right, when they're sort of in person or they're on the phone. But I think honing that skill and getting better at speaking people in person is essential for moving your price points up and for delivering more value. So the one girl, for example, that asked this one question last night was, she's got this discovery questionnaire process that she sends to the client. So it's like a form that they fill out, but it's pretty in-depth. And I was saying that I typically go through that process in a more informal way in the discovery call. So instead of sending someone a booklet, getting them to fill out the questions, they give it back to you, and then you're sending a proposal back. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you're predefining what those questions are, and it doesn't really leave room for a kind of organic conversation to happen where new information kind of comes out of a conversation. So to just kind of passively send that questionnaire, have them fill it out, I think it doesn't establish enough of your own thinking too, like how you're responding to a question that somebody answers and giving your insight. It doesn't allow you to do that. So I think that interactive process it's essential for moving your price points up. I'd love to know what you think about that.
I think so too, and it is a horrible thing to do. By the way, is it getting really dark in here? My screen looks
It's
really
a little
dark.
dark now.
Just give me 1 second. Sorry about the terrible light.
Oh, that's okay.
It's a little better at least. Yeah, no, it is a horrible thing to do. Nobody likes talking to strangers, even if they are going to give you money, or potentially going to give you money. But I think you're right. It's something that you need to learn to do, and it's something you just need to bite the bullet on. And in fact, I kind of went through it a few years back, but not for the client interviews, but when I started presenting my work to clients, as opposed to just sending off the link and saying, "What do you think?" I discovered that actually presenting work in person was, made all the difference in the world. For the same things that we were talking about before, because you can see their reactions, you can hear intonation, you can say, you can explain your thinking, and it's a similar thing with the client interview, those pre-screening questions. I think it's good to get a few questions out of the way before you even think about talking to them, because if they're really not your type of client, then obviously you don't want to waste any time. But the majority of those questions that are sort of more involved, that are asking about sort of project needs, scope, problems, then I think they should be done in person, because you're going to be more invested, they're going to be more invested in you once you start to talk. I really believe that sort of a proposal isn't a standalone product. You cannot just send a proposal and hope for the best. Well, because that's what you'll be doing. You will just be hoping for the best. If there's no interaction, if there's no connection between you and the potential client, then you're just playing a numbers game.
It's easy to ignore, right? It's easy to ignore a form that gets sent to you that says, "Hey, do a bunch of homework for me," right?
Sure.
It almost puts the work on the client versus having you taking on the work by saying, "Absolutely, let's meet with you, and I'm going to dig deeper, and I'm going to do my work by asking you questions," versus, "Hey, fill out this form." I think it just kind of...
Yeah, and plus I think probably what they fill out in that form probably won't be what they tell you in person anyway, because they probably got their down pat set of answers to their set of problems, and they'll tell you, we need a website because A, B, and C. Whereas in actual fact, the real reason they might need a new website could be something totally different. But of course, if you're only sending out a form, you're only gonna get half of the story if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Because
that's a great point about how when people have to answer a question on the spot, like it's different than filling out a form. I think you're right. You are going to get more of a gut reaction from the client than this sort of well thought out perfect answer, which I think is great. Like, you're going to be getting a more honest conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's how many times have designers, creatives, whatever field you work in, gotten the email that said, I need this product or I need this service and I need it to do this, that, and the other, sort of only to feel let down once they get the deliverables, once they get the new website, because it didn't hit the goals that they had in their mind. And it's not hitting the goals they had in their mind because those goals were never vocalized. It was just, I need a website and I need it to do this, that, and the other. But until you talk to that person, and I really, really believe that these pre-proposal conversations that you have, turning your questionnaire into a conversation with a real person, is the most valuable thing you can do in the whole proposal process. You don't need to be a wordsmith. You don't need to be Shakespeare. I'm certainly not. It's simply just learning about the client and the project and seeing whether you can actually help them, whether you can bring value to the table. All you have to do, really, is just repeat back what you've heard. Obviously, you want to think about it a little bit because you want to think about how you can actually help them. But all you're essentially doing is repeating back their own concerns and worries and telling them how you can help them on the other side of that. That's it. It
Yeah.
all comes from those interviews.
And it's interesting because as I'm reading, Sarah's outline here, I can totally relate to her in that I used to get really, really stressed out in those meetings, like sweating, nervous, feeling really put on the spot, not being sure how to answer those questions. So I think it's something you can only get better with experience. Like I think you have to be willing to practice and to talk with more people. Talk with people that aren't even your client, that you're not expecting to be your client, but just you have to get practice doing it. There's no other way to do it than to just do it. And I can so relate to that feeling, but I really do think that's the difference between, again, just a person that executes and a strategist that's going to help you actually meet your business goals. I think you just can't do it from hiding behind your computer screen anymore.
I think so, and I think if it's going to be a project, any kind of project that's going to have any sort of ongoing, over a period of time, period of weeks or months, and you're regularly meeting, I think you can actually get to enjoy these meetings, and these meetings, ongoing meetings, can then help you feel more comfortable when it comes to talking to the next sort of unknown potential client. When I first started doing the presentations, I was the same. I was incredibly nervous, didn't like them at all. But by the end of them, I was already planning the next meeting because they were so enjoyable. And while it's slightly different to the sort of that new client interview, you can sort of start getting into the role of it and seeing, what comes out of it, because the benefits that come out of it far outweigh the nerves and the sweating and everything going into it.
Absolutely. I think I can definitely say my business has totally changed since the shift in, most clients I would just never meet, I would never see ever. Like you would do everything through email, and I'd work together with them for like 3 years, and you'd never even see their face or hear their voice. But now it's I don't work without that, those regular check-ins. So on a web project, on like a 3 or 6 month web project, we're meeting at least every 2 weeks for at least an hour, and like those ongoing check-ins and those updates have been game-changing, I think, for just the way the projects turn out, for the client relationship. Everything changes when you're willing to listen to somebody.
I think so.
Yeah.
The stronger the stronger the client relationship, the better everyone involved in the project is. The more comfortable you feel, the more comfortable you feel in speaking up if you think something's not as it should be. The more comfortable they can feel in speaking up if they think something's not as it should be. We have to forget about the days gone by when customers would come and hire us. We'd get a down payment, we'd disappear into our cave for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden appear and go, ta-da, here it is.
And you're supposed to love this thing that I put in.
And you're supposed to love it and wonder why, why you can see the tumbleweeds going by. It's all everything. The entire process is about interaction and communication, and that translates all the way through to the proposal. And a client can see that. A client can see if a proposal has been written to them, about their problem, in language that they use and can understand. Yeah. That's a soundbite.
No, I love that. I think being willing to hop on the phone when necessary, or Skype or whatever, is just it's almost like with all the technology we have available, there's no excuse. It's so easy to connect with people, and I just think it's just such a great way to position yourself as a partner for somebody. Like, I'm there for you when you need me. Like, absolutely, let's hop on a call. It's most of the time it's way easier for people to talk something out than to type it out, right? If they're kind of thinking through an idea or whatever. I just find the chemistry that happens, the creative chemistry that happens when you're really listening to the client and you're kind of bouncing ideas off each other, the project can take a whole different direction that it never would have gone there if you had just been thinking through email. So I've seen firsthand what a difference it can make to be willing to do that. So.
Yeah, totally. It's what you were saying before. As soon as the client says something, an idea bounces into your head, you throw that back at them, then they start thinking again, and the whole thing can just go off in a totally different direction. And of course, the budget can also, increase due to the fact that all these new ideas are coming, being brought onto the table. So, and that would never have happened with your please fill out this form and get it back to me by the end of the day, and I'll send you a proposal.
Very big proposal. Yeah, it doesn't.
It just wouldn't happen.
I agree. I'm going to have to crack the whip on Sarah. So she's saying, so maybe she sent some questions ahead of time that they could at least review before the call. Could that be a compromise, which I think is actually a great idea. Or even like some talking points, or maybe things, hey, here's some things to consider before our call, and like maybe give them a bulleted list of just some things that you'll go over, but still keep some of those questions organic, I think would be a good thing.
Yeah.
She said, I still feel like I wouldn't really be able to give them pricing or advice over the phone, but am I supposed to, or is that what the proposal's supposed to do? And I'm just there to ask questions. So absolutely, I never give a price right in that first call. I say like, great, like I need some time to kind of digest this and think about it and dig into their analytics if they've had a chance to send that to you. I always creep on my clients. I always do Google research. I'm checking them out on Twitter. I'm checking out their social media platforms, just seeing what's going on behind the scenes. So I need time to digest all of that after a conversation. So absolutely don't commit to a price and don't feel like you have to. So
no. Never give a price across on the phone. There are so many more things, like you said, that you need to look at, you need to think about. You couldn't even possibly begin to know how you can help them on that, during that initial consultation or meeting. These are things that you need to look at. I would really, and some clients will really try and push you into giving them a price. They might even play the same tactics on you, saying, "Well, just give me a ballpark." If you really do need to do a ballpark, then I would just move towards the minimum price you're willing to work for anything, in that sort of project.
Projects tend to start at, Yeah.
But other than that, I would really, really try and, I would just say, sorry, I need to look at this, I need to think about it, I need to study, and it doesn't even need to then, after that initial consultation and research, go to proposal. It can go to another conversation, because you may well have more questions, based on the answers you've given. If you've recorded the Skype chat, or you've recorded the phone call, that afternoon or that next morning when you're listening to it, I'm sure other things will pop into your head again, and you'll think, oh wow, actually it would be helpful if I could go back and we could talk about this more. It can be valuable to have several meetings before you can get the proposal. And I think over time as well, you can learn to see which projects are going to be more valuable, that do hold interest, that you are generally interested in taking on as well. And you can sort of almost have an idea of how much time you're willing to invest before getting to the proposal, or in actual fact just saying, well, thinking about it, maybe I'm not the best fit, which of course you can do at any point.
And I think it's maybe even a great idea to start making it a point of jumping on a call pretty early with people that get in touch with you, even just for the practice. Like even if you're just beginning anyway, like some of these people are kind of just out of school and they're just starting, I think it would be so great to just get your practice by hopping on a call quickly, even if you don't have an intention of taking on the project, just to kind of practice asking those questions, practice getting comfortable in a meeting, as hard as it is. I just think that would be a great opportunity to just do it.
I think so. The more you can push yourself on those things, it's not that it will necessarily become a part of your life that you relish, or that you sort of, this is my favorite part of the project, but at least it will get easier, and at least you'll sort of learn to know the questions you should be asking, or it will just give you won't have to be awake all night the night before, at least, maybe after 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 of these calls, or however long it takes.
They totally get easier, and I honestly believe that the reason I've been able to push my price points up so high, is that initial conversation. People get so energized and so excited by that first call. And I admit I'm somebody that was absolutely terrified of people, and I didn't want to ever pick up the phone and didn't ever want to do a Skype call. So I know it's possible if you're willing to work on it. And for me, I started organizing these Twitter meetups, and I was like, okay, I'm putting myself out there. I need to get better with people. I know that if I want to make more of an impact in my business, I have to get better with people. Like, that is just essential. You can't avoid, business is about people, right? And if you can't learn how to be good with people, it's fine. It's just, it's really hard to grow your business. Like you are going to stay small and maybe work on smaller projects, which is fine if that's what you want. But if you do want to grow your business and make it a little easier, I think that's just one place where there's so much room to.
Yeah, and it's totally normal as well. So many of us, myself included, maybe it's something in us where it's the creative, sort of chip, or maybe it's just the fact that, something about wanting to work apart, whatever that is. A lot of us do suffer from this. Oh no, I really can't talk to these people, but it does get easier. Not all situations get easier, but you do it enough and it will get easier. But it's something that you need. It's something you need to be, to do. If you want, like you say, if you want your business to move forward, there are always going to be certain areas of freelancing that are not as appetizing, but you will need to push into.
Yeah, if you're a sort of one man, one woman operation, you have to wear all the hats, right? If you're
exactly
not going to hire somebody to do that for you, then you need to get good at that part of the process.
I mean, I know some people who live their life stepping out of their comfort zone, continually, because they say, they love it. This is how we learn. This is how we do it. So, what can I do today that's going to make me feel uncomfortable? I don't quite live my life that way at all, but there are people that do it. But it's important, I think, to know, like you say, that making sure that we can talk to people is actually going to push your business forward. It's actually going to advance you, because communicating through email the whole time is not going to do you any favors, really. You're going to stay at this level where you're at, and that's going to be it, pretty much. As you say, you need to be with people. You need to be communicating. Our business is communication, essentially. So that's what it is.
Somebody just asked if do you charge your clients for these conversations? And I said, absolutely not. This is the chance to form a connection and to see, if you're a good fit. So, I give at least an hour of my time, at least, to investigate the project. So I don't bill for that time. That's just, I don't know how you feel about that, but.
No, I don't either. I don't. I think you probably have to be in a very special place to be able to bill for your meeting time. In fact, but I'm sure that Alan Weiss doesn't even charge for initial consultations if he thinks he's going to be making $1 million out of it. But no, I don't know, because at this point in time, I have no idea what the project is worth to me or to them. So once you've gone through that pre-screening and you know that there's something there of interest, no, I'll sit down and I'll talk to them on that initial session for as long as the conversation feels natural. And to be honest, even if it went to a second or third, I probably wouldn't charge for those meetings if I knew that there was going to be enough value coming out of it at the other end.
I think it's factored into the larger scope of the project, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know, and I don't know how you deal with this, but I know there are people who charge, once you get past that initial consultation, the roadmap then comes into it. And I know people that charge for the road mapping session then, where you come in and discover actually what the project might involve. And I know people charge anywhere from sort of $400 up to $2,500, $3,000 for that. Again, that's not something I've done myself, but it could be a valuable thing to look at. But with regards to meeting with clients, finding out what they need, finding what their problems are, no, I don't charge for that, and I don't see a need to either, really.
And there was one last question I had for you about whether or not you present your proposals in person.
Do you know what? I was talking to Marcus Blankenship. He's actually our advisor at Nusii, and he ran an agency for 20 years. They've dealt with proposals, sort of up into their millions. And he was a firm advocate of always presenting the proposal. But of course, over 20 years, you're talking about sort of in-hand proposals as well, where you're actually physically delivering the document. Xerox machines were still alive and well then. But I don't present my proposal. But when I've had conversations with him, his conversations have always swayed me. For the same reasons that the conversations we have over Skype with our clients, in that you can see how a person is reacting, you can explain something to them. If they have a question about the cost, which they invariably will, then you can get to that and address those things. So I can see all those valuable reasons for it, but the honest truth is I just don't do it. Maybe I should, but I don't do it. But I can 100% see the value in presenting it. But I think the real reason I don't present is because usually my clients are in other countries, and it's very rare that our timetables match up. So, for example, even with sort of sidestepping from proposals to presenting work, if there was no way that we could meet and I wasn't going to get up at 4 in the morning, I would record a video and present everything, and then send the video over as a poor second to live presenting. But so I take it that you present all your proposals in person, yeah?
No, I don't. But like that's something I've been thinking about as well. That I've been reading. It's essential to do that. But I think I've been sort of lucky in that the relationships that by the time I write a proposal, I already know I have the project, and it's more of a formality, right? That's the thing.
It's by the time you get to the proposal, you already have, if you've done your work, you already have a pretty good idea about whether the gig is yours or not. Most of it becomes a formality, and this is what I mean when a proposal isn't a standalone product. It becomes a link in the chain, because if you've developed that relationship well enough, if you've learned enough about that client, if you've gelled with them, then sort of the price almost becomes very secondary, and it's just a confirmation of everything you've learned.
Definitely.
And I really, really believe in that. I don't, Nusii is a proposal platform, but I would never encourage anybody to just go out and play the numbers game on proposals and just, sending out a proposal. I know agencies who have got a sort of a win rate, a close rate of 18-20%, and to me, that is just not the way to do business. I mean, how can you do business with that? I don't know. I mean, they must be sending out proposals every 10 minutes. It's very rare that I won't get a proposal accepted. Very rare, but not because I'm great at writing proposals or that I have my own proposal software. It's because of the work we put in before, and because there is a connection there. And I think that's by far the most important thing you could learn about proposals. It's about the connection. Okay. It's about learning. It's about how you can help them, as everyone says, a better tomorrow for them. So.
And the proposal is just the vehicle to sort of.
The proposal is just the link, almost the final link in getting you to actually starting to help them make that better tomorrow. So please just don't ever think about a proposal as being, an item that will get you a gig. Because it's not. And if it does,
yeah.
Exactly. And if it does work like that for you, it's only ever going to work for so long, and it's only ever going to work so many times. If you want to guarantee that as close as we can that you're going to get that gig, then you need to put in all this time up front. Whether you choose to charge for that, whether you have your road mapping sessions, however you play that, it's up to you. But that time needs to be put in. I believe.
I love that. I love that we touched upon so much of the importance of the before the proposal, because I think that's everything. So, yeah, I'm glad we had a chance to talk about the importance of that. So yeah, we've gone above an hour, so I really, really appreciate your time. And where can people find you online? I know you've got an amazing blog where you always keep it updated. You've got your podcast, so let people know where's the best place to find you.
The best place, just drop by, the Nusii blog is a good place to go. It's nusii.com, nusii.com, and then just /blog. Obviously, check out Nusii. And if you have any questions about anything that we've spoken about, feel free to drop me a line as well. It's Nathan at Nusii. and I'll be only too happy to hear from you. Anything that comes through, you'll hear back from me, no problem.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation and just being willing to spend an hour talking about proposals.
Thank you for having me, Ray. It's been great. It's been great talking to you, and not as nerve-wracking as I thought.
Oh no, it's all good stuff. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks, then.